We are joined this evening by Yannick Jacob. Yannick is an existential coach. He is a positive psychologist, a coach, trainer, and supervisor, and he's also a mediator. He is the program director of the Accredited Certificate in Integrative Coaching at the School of Positive Transformation, and he's also the former program leader of the University of East London Masters of Coaching Psychology. And then we've got a lot of UEL students here tonight. I'll hand it over to you, Yannick.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ray. It's such a pleasure to be here, and it's such a pleasure to see lots of familiar faces when you see a generation of positive psychology coaches maturing and now presenting at conferences and being in the space. It's just a joy. So thank you for the space, thank you for the platform, and thank you everybody here for your interest in meaning-centered coaching. Particularly in the workplace. What I want to do today is I'll talk you through why meaning is important in the first place. Why is it important to focus on meaning in coaching, but also in your life? You know, you don't need to be a coach to benefit from some of these techniques and from the coaching angle. So I'll talk a little bit about a few different dimensions. How can we make sense of meaning and purpose? Often meaning and purpose are used interchangeably. But they're actually not the same. So different dimensions around meaning, including purpose, we'll talk about. Then we'll talk a little bit about how coaching can help to increase meaning and how we generally can increase meaning, how we might measure meaning, and a couple of tools and techniques. Let's see how much we have time for at the end of this rather short presentation. But I'd love to give you an insight into what it looks like in practice, or what it can look like in practice, to take a more meaning-centered approach. But first, I want to start off with this guy. The vast majority of you will have heard of him, Simon Sinek. He's the author of Start With Why, one of the most watched TED Talks in the history of TED, actually. I'm a hardcore optimist, quite an idealist, and I quite like it, but he always brings so much experience from working in workplaces. And his focus is obviously on why. He says, by why, I mean your purpose, your cause, or your belief. Why does your company exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anybody care? People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so that goes for employees in the workplace as well. People often don't work for what you do, but they work for why you do it. At least the research has shown that they work better when they're very much connected with your why. And obviously that purpose has a strong factor of meaning in there. So this goes through all of the workplace and through all of life. It's a very, very strong driver, and the success of his movement and follow-up books on Find Your Why, I think they're testament to people care about this stuff. And he brings lots and lots of very practical example of how leaders, workplaces, organizations do better when they have a clear why at their center. Another person who talks about why was Friedrich Nietzsche, existential philosopher from the 19th century. Friedrich Nietzsche, famously quoted by Viktor Frankl, said, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." So if you have that strong why at the center, Frankl was in concentration camps in Nazi Germany, that why literally kept people alive. If you had something you wanted to do after, something you wanted to cared about, in the case of Viktor Frankl, it was his manuscripts and his work that he felt was unfinished. The Nazis had burned his notes and his notebooks, and a lot of his work was lost, so he wanted to recreate it. That literally kept him alive through the darkest of times. We can take that kind of idea and transfer it to the workplace. And I kind of took the liberty to take that quote and reword it as members of an organization, or also organizations as a whole. Members of an organization with a strong sense of meaning and purpose can overcome almost any personal or professional challenge. So again, not the darkest of times comparable to Nazi Germany, but people in organizations can go through pretty dark times. We just emerging here in the UK somewhat out of one of these dark times, but a lot of the world is still very much in those dark times. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought up a lot of big challenges for leaders, for individuals, for teams. And those with a strong sense of why they're doing this, why they're struggling, and what might come out of this at the end, they're more resilient. So we know that often intuitively and from philosophy and from practical areas. But here along comes Mike Steger, and who's a meaning researcher. And he looked into the vast majority of the meaning literature. These days, it's difficult to keep up with. But it's very much an emerging field of research. But we have a lot of data now. And Mike writes that as both physical and virtual mobility of the workforce increases, by the way, this was in 2017, and now the virtual mobility is increasing 10x with companies. Companies need to offer more profound reasons for their best talent to stay. Because there is a war on talent that has been termed like that. Good people are leaving organizations for a long range of reasons. But really what we can do to make them stay, to have them retain their jobs and keep their talent, is that they feel meaning in their daily experience at work or in the overall experience at work. He writes, employees, looking at the data, employees appear to be seeking meaningful work, and they may expect their employers to be able to provide it. So there's a responsibility that has been put on leadership in organizations to create the conditions for meaningful work. He keeps writing, meaningful work is considered an important cornerstone of talent retention, organizational optimization, and employee well-being. We know that employee well-being affects large areas of organizational success, both on an individual and also on an organizational level. So some of these benefits of experiencing work as meaningful. I mentioned Viktor Frankl, and he wrote that we have a will to meaning hardwired into our fabric. That means meaning, the experience of meaning is central to the human experience. We all seek meaning. We are meaning-making machines. How many people have spent decades of their career trying to figure something out, make sense of something? We all seek some form of experience of, this makes sense, this is somewhat fulfilling. So there's a lot of levels of meaning that we just naturally seek. And we know that intuitively, but we also know that from the data. The data has also shown that meaning is as important as salary and job security. And similarly, the majority of employees in this survey by Keller Services would choose a pay cut to have a more meaningful work experience. And again, I know that for myself intuitively, I would choose less money to have more meaning. I know, depending on your values, that there might be a range, and it is a majority. That means it's over 50%. So a lot of people still care about other things, but clearly the data shows a majority, a huge amount of people care for meaning. Employee well-being is a cornerstone, meaning is a cornerstone of well-being, and employee well-being has been shown to link to higher levels of sales, more resilience, less sick leave. As positive psychologists in the workplace, many of you will be, you know how important well-being is for the triple bottom line, people, profits, and the environment. So more and more companies have realized that over the last 10 or 20 years. When I started studying positive psychology, you were laughed out of the room when you mentioned positive psychology or well-being. You know, now we have the data to back it up. It's actually going to be really profitable for you. So meaning is a cornerstone, according to Riff Psychological Wellbeing or Seligman's PERMA model. Health has been linked with meaning. So people who experience more work as more meaningful, they take less sick leave. And we have some data to back that up. And there's a fantastic chapter by, again, Mike Steger, who looked at the data around meaning and found increases in performance, more job retention, less burnout, more intrinsic motivation at work. So work as fulfilling in itself rather than you do the work for a paycheck at the end or a promotion or status. More job satisfaction, better attitudes, more positive feeling towards the organizations, more faith in management, greater work unit cohesion, and your teams function better. So there's a whole lot more. Writing a chapter on this recently with Mike, we had to cut out a lot of the data because there's just too many benefits of meaning. but there's some really good resources where you can look that up. But it's still so much is emerging, but it's clearly very important. So what is it? I don't want to spend too much time on the theory. There are generally two camps, two aspects that tap into meaning: drivers and appraisals. So you can see some of the drivers, such as craftsmanship and connection with other people, contribution. And Mike took these and put this into a nice three-factor model. And there's three levels of meaning that we can make sense of what meaning is, because it's such a large umbrella term for a lot of things. People use the word meaning in various different ways. And if we look at all these ways of how it's been used, there's coherence. Things make sense. When something makes meaning, when we make meaning out of something, the German and the English sense, there's a double meaning. We can feel it, there's a sense, but also it makes sense. It is coherent in itself. It is whole. So when something makes sense and is coherent, then we talk of something having meaning. But obviously there's more to meaning. So we can talk about significance. If something is significant, it holds value for us personally or for us collectively. And then there's this purpose, which is meaning that is aimed towards the future. So there's meaning in the very present. We can experience things that are meaningful through our senses, through a sense of meaning, but also through it being significant right now. But purpose is always aimed at the future. It connects to a mission. It connects to something that we care about in the future. So when we have that sense of purpose, we have meaning towards the future. And I mentioned appraisal. So it's not just these drivers that drive us towards meaning, but also it's how we appraise meaning. We can choose meaning depending on our personal set of what we deem meaningful, what we deem to be meaningful. And that is very subjective, or can be very subjective. It can be very different. If you ask 20 people what's meaningful to them, you probably get 20 different answers. So there's a whole set of appraisals. And what that allows us to do is there isn't just the meaning of life, or there isn't the meaning of work. If there may be one thing, but we couldn't really comprehend it with our human perspective. But what we can find is meaning in life. We can choose things to be meaningful, or we can appraise things as meaningful. So, and that's a personal thing. And this is why coaching can be such an important tool. Because we have the freedom to choose what is meaningful to us. And that's very empowering. That's a very useful thing, especially for workplace meaning, because you have two people in the same job, and one has a very meaningful experience and the other one doesn't. And that's where it gets really interesting, because it's up to us. We can choose things to be meaningful, and that changes our experience significantly. So here's a really useful model I like by Mike and some of his colleagues. There are three levels in this. At the outer rim, you can see work that provides an opportunity to benefit others or some greater good. Meaning is something that is bigger than you. So meaning at work is work that contributes to something that is bigger than you or bigger than the organization. Peter Hawkins talks about systemic coaching and how we need to bring other stakeholders in the room. It's a fantastic exercise to tap into something that is bigger than the employee that you're coaching. In the middle, we have work that is in harmony with and helps provide meaning in workers' personal life. So if you experience meaning on a personal level, that is in harmony with what you care about, what is aligned with your values and what's important to you personally, that's a very strong connection. And then in the center, we have work that feels meaningful and has an identifiable point and purpose in an organization. So at a very core level, the work that you do matters within the purpose of what the organization does. So you're aligned with what the organization wants to do. Further out, you're aligned with what the organization wants to do, and it connects to you personally. And then beyond that, you do work that matters in line with what the organization wants, in line with what you care about personally, and that is connected to a greater good. So you can imagine if you have all those three levels of meaning, then your work experience is going to be a very meaningful one. in our chapter coming out in a book that actually Suzy and Wendy Ann Smith, you will see her in the next session today, and Ilona Bonneville, who founded the Masters that I studied in 2008. That book we wrote, Meaningful Work is What Arises When People Find a Way of Expressing Themselves in a useful ways through effective work with and for other people, and when that work has significance to the world beyond them. So you can see that these three levels of meaning and all these conceptualizations can be neatly summed up in a sentence. Still longer than perhaps your punchy definition, but meaning is a complex construct. And meaning at work, I think it's really useful to offer people a relatively easy way to understand that. And when we break meaning down in these levels, I think we can see that on each of these levels, we can offer different kinds of interventions. So how can we increase meaning? And argue that there's generally two levels to increase meaning. The traditional way is what's often expected, is that it's top down. It's leaders who are expected to provide this level of meaning. Leaders can create the fertile ground for meaningful work. They can create the conditions for work. And I'll share a model with you that we can follow both as coaches and also as leaders thinking about how we can create more meaningful work experiences. And bottom up. Bottom up is when we work as coaches with individuals in an organization, or when individuals in an organization, employees, take personal responsibility for creating meaning in their lives. Maybe because their managers or their leaders are unwilling or unable to create the conditions for meaningful work. Way too many workers don't have that kind of support. So, but there are a lot of things that you can do on an individual level to increase your experience of meaning. So here are two models, again, created by Mike Steger, who I'm deeply grateful for his work. I do share some resources in the end. Check him out. He's offering generously. And these two models I find particularly helpful in coaching. First of all, it's a neat acronym called KARMA. And you can see that along 5 dimensions, clarity, authenticity, respect, meaning, and autonomy, you can start having those conversations as leaders with yourself or with your leadership team or with your employees. And also as coaches with leaders that you might be working with or anybody in decision-making positions to influence the creation of such workplaces or such conditions. So you need to be clear about what your vision and mission statement is. And this is a lot of what Simon Sinek's work is about. Be able to communicate it clearly, what you care about as a company, not just as a statement on your website somewhere that a few consultants have come up, but something that is embodied, something that is clearly formulated so people get it, and it's got to be authentic. It's got to be embodied. It's got to be lived. It's no use to have a statement on a page on a website or in a memo or, as something that you communicate. People have to they have to feel that this is something that you care about. It needs to be authentic. They need to follow their own mission. If leaders behave in a way that is not aligned with their mission, they're losing trust, and their employees and their followers, they lose a sense of meaning because it just seems like a sham or something that they do to look good. And that kind of conflict within organizations, that kind of conflict in bias is very harmful to organizational culture and to the experience of the people working for it. Respect is a very important thing. You need to build positive relationships in an organization. And it begins with leadership respecting their followers, their workers. They need to relate to them in a way that creates opportunities for good interactions. If you're being listened to about what you find meaningful, if a leader or a manager engages with you and figures out what you care about on a personal level, then they can make meaningful connections between what the company does and what their people care about. They can create initiatives. If it's a very social company, they can create initiatives to connect more, or they can create initiatives as a company to connect more with their stakeholders. So there's so much you can do, but it starts from leadership showing their followers that kind of respect. Meaning, obviously here, leadership must convey to each worker exactly how their contribution is vital to the success and the health of the organization and its mission. So it's important that that communication of meaning to each individual is clear, and how they contribute. That element of contribution is in many of these meaning theories, and it shows up in everyday life. If somebody feels like they're contributing in ways that they're clear about, I know what my work contributes to, it's very, very effective. How often do I have coaching clients who really suffer from not seeing what their work is doing? They never have any contact with the final stakeholders, with the clients. They never see their product in action. They don't get to hear the feedback. And some of these things are very, very easy to create. Just show them the feedback of some of your clients. Communicate that. And I know many people already do that, but many don't. And there's certainly, it's a page on the paper. They don't get the emotional content of how their work is making a difference. And autonomy, it's important that you create the environment for your people to do how they want to do things. Obviously, within a certain range, there needs to be some guidance, but sometimes there doesn't, because you can trust the people that work for you to do good work. It's important that you offer them opportunities to do things their way, because that kind of thing leads to innovation. The people at the bottom, 90% of the ideas are created by the 10% of the people, not at the 10% of the people at the top, but the people at the bottom, the people who are working on the floor. They're the people who really know. And if you choose to trust them, that's where new ideas are being born. The other model is called SPIRE, and this is the way to create meaning bottom up for each individual to create more meaning. Tapping into strength is such a powerful pathway into somebody's sense of meaning. Strength, there's many profiles out there. The VIA, there's the Strength Finder by Gallup, there's Strength Scope, and also Strength Profile by Capfinity. Whichever model you're using, all of these allow you to figure out what sits at the core. What are you naturally good at? So when you tap into something that somebody's naturally good at, that connects to them, that they feel intrinsically motivated to do, VI literally stands for values in action. So strengths are a pathway to something that you value, and something that you value is intrinsically meaningful. So when you allow, when you use your strength in a new way at work, or in karma, when you when a condition is created at work where you can use your strength more, when maybe people hire their employees based on their strengths and then put them into positions where they can use them, that's incredibly powerful and contributes to an experience of meaning. Make it personal. Align the work that you do with your personal values. Make some of those connections. I've had to me, it was surprising the amount of coaching clients in organizations that hadn't really thought about the meeting points between what they do at work and what the organization cares about and what they care about. So we can integrate why we do our jobs and other elements in our lives. Own your job. It's something that is often felt like as being laid on us or being given to us, especially when people get promoted into positions that they feel they have to take because it's a promotion, but it's maybe not aligned with what they signed up for in the beginning. How many coaching clients after 15, 20, 30 years in an organizations have completely lost their initial motivation of why they started, and they just kind of got used to doing the job because they're good at it and they're getting paid for it. So reigniting that sort of these connections can be a really powerful exercise in creating more meaning. Resonance is about learning the organization's core values. What does your organization care about? If they have that mission statement, when's the last time you looked at it? Is that really embodied? What kind of conversations can you have with people in the organization who can tell you what this organization really cares about? To what extent does it resonate with your personal mission? And expansion, we've seen that creating links to something that's larger than you in this job affects the experience of meaning in great ways. Cool. So what can we do in coaching? How might that look like? First of all, well, utilizing the Karma Inspire model that I just talked you through, there are so many conversations in each of those. If you work with somebody who wants to create meaningful conditions for meaningful work, or somebody who's an individual and they want to create meaning in on their own, there are so many conversations you can have just by being curious about the elements listed in Karma Inspire. So that will fill many, many coaching sessions if you wanted to. I don't think it's easy to run out of that, but it can also be a quick checklist in terms of what is there. Talking about checklist, I wanted to show you this first because I like sometimes as a starting point, depending on my client, but often clients appreciate, and organizations particularly, to measure meaning. And here's the work and meaning inventory that Mike created with his colleagues. And you can see 10 questions. If you just ask that, or if you give somebody that questionnaire, you get a snapshot of somebody's experience of meaning at work. And that's a wonderful entrance into a coaching conversation that is meaning-centered. So the agreement needs to be that, yes, we will be focusing on meaning. And if that is the agreement, based on the many benefits that are connected to meaning, which we might have to include in our conversations with managers, that can really help as a way in. So often goal setting is much more focused on performance than it is about values and meaning and purpose. I know many coaches will do that quite naturally, but many coaches don't. And many clients wouldn't consider that necessarily because the idea of coaching is performance. So if we integrate meaning and purpose into our first 10, 20, 30 minutes of goal setting, then we can make sure that our goals are aligned, that relevant in SMART, for example. Even at a very simple level, if you use SMART goals in organizational coaching, can really help to connect that goal to something that's personally relevant and relevant to the organization. I mentioned strength. I mentioned the 3-factor model. There's a lot of Find Your Why exercises. Simon Sinek wrote a whole book about it with 2 of his colleagues. So there's a lot of very structured methods of helping somebody uncover what sits at the core. In existential coaching, we do a lot of phenomenological inquiry, which is just bracketing everything that you think you know about this person and their experience. And you really tune in and have them describe that. So out of that emerge new meanings. There's a lot written about post-traumatic growth and making meaning in crisis. Meaning is always possible. So even in the darkest, I see the time, Ray, and even in the darkest times, we can choose meaning. And focus on relationships. Meaning comes in relationships. And above all, listen to what your people are saying. Listen to what the coaching client is saying, but listen to what employees in your company are saying. What do they find personally meaningful? What are they lacking? It's just so important. And as a parting thought, Simon Sinek tweeted very recently, loving our work is a right, not a privilege. It is the responsibility of leaders to cultivate work environments where people feel safe, inspired, and fulfilled. Everyone should be able to wake up in the morning and say, I love my job. So my parting thought is this a realistic goal? I want to live in that world. I think that's important. It's not currently the reality. Can it be? And is it important to put the responsibility on our leadership or take personal responsibility? I think it's probably both, but that's what I wanted to leave you with. So if you want to keep in touch, you can follow me. I write some nuggets once a month, and you can sign up for that. And also I put a few resources in the back for you, and I'll share those slides. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Yannick. We really appreciate you giving your time and expertise.
I would love to have some questions. You can always reach out to me. I'd love to have conversations. And I really look forward to the next presentation because I know Clive and Wendy, and I'm really curious about the views of the others. So thank you very much for being here and learning.
Thanks, Yannick.